Okay, so your GMO greetings. I'll say everyone for tuning in to this special short broadcast on the true new year, the Atemet Equinox. If you have any issues with the sound or the images, let me know in the chat room so we can make sure everything is straight. So I want to show you this image here. So when you see this image, we put this image forward to, describe what we're talking about. This is from the papyrus of Sennacherib and his wife Nefertiti. And what they're doing here is they're plowing and they're harvesting. Now, let me blow this picture up a little bit. So you see Sennacherib with the little sickle, which is actually also the symbol for Ma'at and Ma'at. They're in the process of harvesting the grain and so forth. And then you see him with the plow, the Mer symbol, the plow, and they're plowing the land. Now, of course, today the Whites in Narrow Spring are celebrating their New Year observance. We need to understand that first and foremost, we're not the Whites in Narrow Spring. We're not Eurasians. We don't have their perverse and misguided culture. We have our own culture. We live in harmony with the Earth's cycles. As Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people, wherever we exist in the world. Now, when you look at the new year, in reality, the time of year, when you're talking about the shortest day of the year, which is the winter solstice, 15 hours of darkness, 9 hours of sunlight, that is December 21st. And even 10 days later, 11 days later, when you get to January 1st, it is the darkest time of the year. It's the coldest time of the year. When you look at people living in the ice and caves of northern Eurasia, the darkest time of the year, the coldest time of the year, when there's no greenery, when there's no vegetation and so forth, that is a caveman, iceman New Year. People from the natural areas of Earth near the equator and so forth, where we originated, we're not waiting for the darkest time of the year and the darkest time of the day, the coldest time of the year, the coldest time of the day, when there's no growth or development or conception and so forth, to come out at midnight and scream Happy New Year. That's idiotic. It's out of cycle, it's not reality, and it's idiotic. We live in harmony with the cycles of Earth. So for us, for tens of thousands of years, just like you have birds that fly south for the winter, bears go into hibernation. You see the changes in the leaves and the plants and so forth at fall, and then things change back in the spring. We live in harmony with these natural cycles as well. So for us, the harvest time, which is also the seeding time, the conception time, that is the beginning. When you conceive, that's the beginning. That's the new year. And then that's the equinox in September, equal nights, the first day of autumn and so forth. And then in the springtime, that is the birth. That is the second half, the second beginning. That's the second half of the year and so forth. And that is the coming forth, and that's the sprouting and so forth. Now, when we talk about the Atemet Equinox, let me show you where that term comes from. So the term autumn equinox, Atem, and so forth. Let me pull that up for you. Okay. What you see here is the male and female divinity, Atem, the male divinity, Atemet, the female divinity. This is the origin of the term autumn. So when you look at Atem and Atemet, Atem is one of the creative powers. His name Tem means to complete, to bring to a close. So the end of the day, the end of a cycle, the concretizing of the creative process, that's Atem. Now, and then you have the female divinity, Atemet. She's also called Asaase Nebetepet. So let's look at their cosmology. In one of the books I've published, and to date I've published 31 books. One of the books is dealing with the divinity Atem, as well as the divinity Kepra, And we also mention Atemet in this book as well. So let me pull this book up for you. So this is one of the 31 books I published. You can download this ebook for free. We were showing in this book that the deity Atem that you see here, Atem Kopa or Atemu Kopa, he's also called Atem Kepra, so forth in ancient Kemet. In the Akan language of Ghana and Ivory Coast, which many of our people are Akan descendants who were forced into North America. So we practice Akan ancestral religion under the Akan term Undu, which later came to be pronounced Hoodoo and so forth. But we were showing that Odomankoma in the Akan language and culture and ancestral religion is Atumukopa in ancient Kemet. But in the process of doing that, we also showed that the deity Tredriampong in Akan is Chere Ra or Kepra in ancient Kemet. But in the process of showing that, we talk about the cosmology of the deity Atem, and that includes Atemet. And then you get to this notion of what is autumn and what is that talking about. So these are the various ways that his name is spelled: Atem Kepra, Tem Kepra, Temu, Atem, and so forth. So let me go back up. Hold on a second. Now, so you can see both of these. You see Atem sitting inside the red sun. So Atem is not the sun god and so forth. The spiritual force, the concretizing force, the contractive force of solar energy is Atem. So when you see the sun, sometimes it's showing up as a reddish solar disk when the sun is setting and so forth, like you see to the right. In the depictions of ancient Kemet, this is from the papyrus of Ani or Anui, you see the solar disk in its setting, and he's in the boat of the setting sun. So when the sun rises in the east and sets in the west and so forth, they'll show that the deity's inside of a boat. For a contrast, you see Kepra, the beetle, headed divinity. He's in the boat of the rising sun. So when the boat is rising and it's a yellowish disk and so forth, they show the divinity Kepra, the sacred dung beetle and so forth. But when the sun is setting, bringing it to an end, you see Atem in the setting sun, bringing that solar energy to a close. Now let's look at his name. Temu, all complete, whole, entirely full. Tem, to compress, squeeze together to join. Tem, to make an end of, to finish. Temu, hard, compact substance. And we also show this image here in the middle. You see on the right is the divinity Kepra. On the left is Atem, these two figures. And in the middle is Ra in the form of Afura, the creator of the universe, when he's moving through the underworld and so forth, when the sun sets and goes into the underworld, and Ra becomes Afura. This is where we get Afuraka, the land of the creator, Afuraka, and so forth, Africa. We wrote a whole book on that. But you see Atem, the rising sun, inside the rising sun, the solar disk. You see, I'm sorry, Kepra, the rising sun, Atem, the setting sun, and so forth. So when we talk about that process, Ra, as well as Ra'et, they bring creation into being, the creator and creatress of the universe. But when you bring something into being, just like you have some clay, you get the clay, you bring it into being, you shape it into a vase and so forth, you put it on a potter's wheel, you shape it and so forth. But once you have the shape, then you place it in an oven, and then it hardens and it comes into this solidified form. So the fiery energy you need to bring that, creation into a substance, into a solidified form, so it can function as the vessel that you want it to function as. Once things are fashioned into form, they have to be solidified, they have to be concretized, they have to be brung to that substance to a close. So Atem, to make an end of, Atem, to bring to a close, Atem, hard compact substance. Now, when we're talking about the creation of Earth, Atem, the red in the red setting sun, when it sets in the west and penetrates the western, horizon and goes into the underworld. When you take a solar disk and it goes into the underworld, so to speak, apparently from Earth, that's like a seed being planted in the ground. That's a conception time. And when that solar energy goes into the primordial Earth, it fires it up and hardens it, makes it a hard, compact substance. It completes it and so forth. So let's show this process. And I'm going to show the process by showing you one of our other books. And then you'll see how he directly relates to him, as well as Atemet directly relates to the autumn equinox, the conception time, the harvest time, and the beginning of the year. So one of the books we wrote is Afuraitkaitnit, the origin of the term Africa, and we want to show you part of this cosmological process. It's taking a minute to load up. Okay, so in our book, Afuraitkaitnit, the origin of the term Africa, this is from the Papyrus of Nefer, this strip at the top showing Afurakani, the temple of Paraka in so-called Philae in southern Kemet. It says Afurakani. We're just showing in the text of Kemet, the Medut and Toro, the hieroglyphs, that the name is spelled out. And we show that Ra, the creator of the universe, when he's sailing in his boat of the Aten, of the sun and so forth during the day, he takes on the form of a falcon-headed divinity, a bird that flies through the air and so forth. But when the sun sets in the west, and Atem facilitates the sun going into the west, setting and going into the underworld, then you see Ra take on the form of Afura, Ra within the Afu, within the matter, within the flesh. And Afura is moving through the underworld and the earth and so forth. Now, if you look at the cosmology of creation, and we're going to show this. And this, by the way, is Ra'et, the creatress, and you see her name spelled here. The words of Ra'et, Tawi, Arit, Ra, or the Eye of Ra, and so forth, meaning the creatrix of Ra. But when you look at the cosmology of Kemet, we talk about how the primordial earth was covered 100% by water. And there was the first landmass that rose up from under the surface of the water, the high land, to become the first land of earth. And that term, high land, Ka, masculine, Ka'et, feminine, means a high land. And when Afura moved through the first Ka, it became the Ka of Afuraka, the land of the creator, and the Ka'et, the Afurait, the land of the creatress. This is the visual you want to see. So that was that other image was the temple of Philae, so-called Paraka. But we'll talk about how the earth right now is 70+% water, covered by 71% water and so forth. But in the beginning, we would say that the earth was covered totally by water when the spirit of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, began to move within the primordial earth under the water, causing volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor. A portion of the ocean floor surges upward and breaks through the surface of the water. You can look on YouTube for the formation of islands, and they'll do a time lapse, and you'll see that the water's rumbling, and then there are volcanic eruptions, and then a portion of the landmass bursts through the surface of the water, and now you have a highland sticking out of the water, as the image you see here. So we talk about that at the beginning of creation. The earth was a primordial, planet and so forth, covered by water. The spirit force of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, moved through the primordial earth caused volcanic eruptions. A portion of the primordial earth burst through the surface of the water. That was the first land in existence. And because it was the first land in existence, we have a name for that. And you'll see the man here with his hands up in the air. Let's go down to the appendix so you can see. So that first land is called Ka, a hill, high ground, high place. Ka, a land above the surface of the Nile. Ka and Kaet, the highland. You see the man with his hands up in the air and so forth. And then you also see it says, the hill in Kemenua upon which the heavens rested. The high place on which the God of creation stood. So in our book, we show the details about that. We show in our Akan culture, the highland, this primordial land that the creative power first operated upon is called Ka, Kaka, and Ichkamet. The highland upon which the God of creation first stood is called Ka as well as Kaka. In Yoruba, the highland upon which the Orisha, the deities first descended at the creation of the world is called Oke. So Oke in Yoruba is the highland. Ka in Akan is the highland. In Ichkamet, Ka or Kaka is the highland and so forth. So there's a sacred land that's called Ka, Kaka, Ke, Keka, and so forth across languages across the continent. That's the primordial first land that rose up at the beginning upon which the creator and creatress first operated. That is the land Ka of Afura or Afuraka, the land of the creator or land of the creatress. Now, let me pull up one more document just so you can see that. See that cosmology? Okay. Now, this version of the book gives some more detail. It's an expanded version. I want you to see this expanded part. Okay. So we did an expanded version of the original book that you just saw, and that expanded version gives more detail. And we just released the expanded version earlier last year. Okay. Now this is from, we have a 600-page book, my 600-page book. I published 31, but we took 12 of the 31 books I published. You see the covers on the back, and we combined them in a 600-page encyclopedia-sized volume. It's 8.5 by 11. It's 600 pages, full color. And 12 of the books that we published dealing with cosmology and linguistics and culture and cosmology and so forth, we combined. The Afuraitkaitnit book, Origin of the Term Africa, is one of them. So we've expanded on the one that's online. The free one online is the older version. We have the new version. I'll show you how to order this book a little later, but so you see, once again, we're talking about Kayet, Kaka, K, the highline upon which the God of creation first stood and so forth. And let's go back down. So you see here the words for soul, divine consciousness is Kayet, and that's the symbol here. But you also see that the man with his two hands raising up in the sky, high, exalted, up, that's the term Ka, the determinative for a high land, exalted land, a land above the surface of the water, the sacred divine land. That's what it is. So that's Ka. In the older dictionaries, they would use a Q for that symbol, but in the Coptic dialect, as you can see, they transliterate it as the K sound. And so we highlight that here. The Coptic dialect is a late period dialect of the language of Kemet that they came into use at the end of the dynastic period. So they transliterate that as Kai or Ka or Kai. So that's what you're looking at now. So here you see Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress of the universe. They're the ones that bring things into being out of nothing and so forth, and brought the planets and suns and moons and stars into being. You have another divinity named Ptah who fashions them into a specific form. So once that matter is brought into being, fashioned into a specific form, then the final phase is Atem that concretizes the form and makes it a solidified entity in creation. Atem to bring to an end, Atem hard compact substance, Tem to make an end of, to complete, completion. The same with Atemet, the feminine side. Now, when the spirit moves through matter, like when solar energy is out, it's just solar energy. When it penetrates the earth and heats up the earth, now you can say the physical earth, the matter, or the quote unquote flesh, has fire energy inside of it, and now it's being warmed up. Now the solar energy is inside matter. So the solar energy is encased in matter or encased in flesh. The term for flesh or matter is Af, plural Afu in ancient Kemet. So when the spirit of Ra and Ra'et penetrated the primordial earth and they're moving inside of the earth, they become known as Afura and Afuraitkait, Ra and Ra'et, and sit inside of the flesh, inside of the matter, inside of the earth. And so you see the image from the tomb of Ra-Mesu of Ra taking the form of a ram-headed animal, an earth animal, when he's in the underworld, and he's known as Afura. This is an image from the tomb of Seti. When I was in Kemet the last time, I took this picture with my iPhone to put it in the book and so forth. So this is Afura moving in the underworld. And then we show you a close-up. When we are teaching, we have a 2-part online course that is archived, where you can learn to read and write the Medut Torah, misnomer hieroglyphs. Hieroglyph is a Greek word, but Medut, which is the sacred words or symbols, Torah, of the divinity. Medut Torah. Some people say Medu Necher, but Medut Torah, the words of divinity or divine words and so forth. We have a 2-part course that's archived that you can access for $15 to learn how to begin reading and writing the language of Kemet today. So, but we show these linguistics to show that his name, as spelled Afu or Afura, right there in the text. Okay. Now, when the sun, this is the last hour of the night, and the sun is being passed right here into the sky and so forth, to go from being in the underworld to the sky, that is the beginning of the day. That is sunrise. But then you have sunset. And this is where Atem comes in. So let's get back to Atem. So first you have to have Ra and Ra'et creating the universe, bringing things into being. And once things are brought into being, then you have to concretize those things and, solidify them. Let me get back to hold on a second. All right. So now you have a better understanding cosmologically of when the sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. Once it sets in the west, the solar disk goes into the ground, it fires it up. And that first primordial bound that broke through the surface of the water, it was still wet, it was soggy, just like you have wet clay that you fashion into a form. It broke through the surface of the water, is there, but then the solar disk, for the very first time, sets, quote unquote, on that primordial mountain or high land. And then once that solar energy penetrates or sets inside of that high land, it fires it up, it dries it out, it makes it into a hard, compact substance, Tem, it completes it, Atem, it makes it into a concretized form, Atem, and now you have a solid earth upon which plant life and mineral life and animal life, and eventually Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African human life can come into being. So Atem is the beginning of that process, and the female divinity is Atemet. So you see Atem here, then you see seated. Actually, they're not behind him, they're really next to him, but they're showing it, staggered like that. You see Asaase Nebet Hetepet and Asaase Nebet Pet, but Asaase Nebet Hetepet is also called Atemet. Let's scroll up a little bit. These two goddesses, Asaase Nebet Hetepet and Asaase Nebet Pet, in Akan culture, they are called Asaase Afua and Asaase Ya. But Asaase Nebet Hetepet and Asaase Nebet Pet in ancient Kemet, these are the two Earth Mother divinities. Asaase Nebet Hetepet is the fertile Earth Mother, and Asaase Nebet Pet is the barren Earth Mother, where the graves are, cemeteries, rocks, barren earth, the desert, all of that. Asaase Nebet Hetepet is the fertile Earth Mother, where everything grows, is green and fertile and everything else. And that's the female divinity that is typically called the Mother Earth across Afuraitkaitnit, Africa, and so forth. In Akan, she's Asaase Afua. In Yoruba, she's the Orisha called Onile, the Earth Mother, whereas Yewa in Yoruba is the barren Earth Mother. In Akan, Asaase Ya is the barren Earth Mother. Asaase Afua is the fertile Earth Mother, and so forth. But Asaase Afua, the fertile Earth Mother, is the female counterpart to Atem, we call Odumankoma. And they're the ones that form the primordial earth. They give the fire of vitality, of energy within the primordial forming earth. And it's from her body, the feminine side, that the sprouts begin to happen. But it starts off with a conception. Now, and this is where we get into this notion of the new year being the conception time as well as the seeding time. Now, so we're going to get back to that image. All right. So if you look at Atem, Atemet, Atem, and then Asaase Nebet Hetepet, who you just saw, she is the fertile Earth Mother. Now, when the solar disk penetrates the Earth and her spirit is within the Earth, now you have, just like a sperm and ovum fusing together to, bring into being a new child and so forth, the energetic force that animates the sperm, the energetic force that animates the ovum and so forth. In that context, you're dealing with Atem and Atemet. Now, when you see the sun set in the west, if you look at the day cycle, sunrise, sunset, of course, in between you have the noon, the highest point in the sky, the solar disk, and midnight, the deep darkness, the sun and the quote unquote underworld and so forth. So you have these 4 different phases. You also have those same 4 phases as far as the year cycle goes. Now let's look at that. And this is where we get into the sacred year, which is a real year. Okay. We did a broadcast, live stream on our sacred ritual calendar. And we talked about how Black people in North America have maintained the same ancestral ritual calendar. Even some people who practice hoodoo and juju and voodoo and so forth, and they know exactly what they're doing. But then even some of us who got pulled away from real ancestral religious practice, got brainwashed with Christianity and Islam and Judaism and all of that, but we still maintained ancestral ritual cycles, even though consciously we weren't aware of it, but subconsciously we did maintain them and still engage in certain rituals. So when you see our sacred cosmogram, the Per Ankh Nut, that many people on the continent have, in our Khan culture, it is represented by the solar disk here, which they call a solar parhelion. The solar disk, and it's a rainbow around the sun and so forth. And you have these different points around it. That's a solar parhelion. But we represented that in this sacred Okra Komwadie, this soul washer's disc, as they call it in our Khan tradition. And you see we have the same structure. We also have our Dinkra symbols that represent that. But the cosmological structure is this. You see fire, water, earth, and air. Oja is fire. Nsyo is water. Asaase is earth. Mframa is air. If you look at this cosmogram and you look at the year cycle, first look at the day cycle. If you look at the yellow circle, these are the 4 different positions of the sun. If you look at the yellow circle, that is sunrise, breaking through the surface of the earth, sunrise, the air element, and so forth. Say 6 in the morning, then you have the sun at the peak of the day, the fiery part of the sun, the hottest time of the day, that is noon. Then the sun sets, the sun becomes old and the hair gets gray or white and so forth. That is the evening point, around 6 p.m. And then the sun, the black sun, goes into the deep darkness, midnight, into the quote unquote underworld and so forth. That is midnight, 12 p.m. So you already see that the day begins at sunrise. The whites and their offspring will say the day begins at midnight. Pure stupidity. It's not based in reality. Just like they miscount that, the same thing with the year. We don't begin the year at the darkest, coldest time of the yearly cycle, as well as the nighttime, 12 midnight, cold, December 20th, beginning the winter solstice and so forth, the beginning of the winter season. And 10 days later, they're talking about Happy New Year. That's absurd. Now look at the year cycle. The yellow circle is the spring equinox around March 20th. Equinox is equal nights, 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness. And then after March 20th, every day, sunlight increases about a minute to 2 minutes per day till you get to June 22nd or 21st, the summer solstice, beginning of summer, the longest day of the year, the highest point in the sky, the sun rises, the hottest time of the year, 15 hours of sunlight and only 9 hours of darkness. But then after the summer solstice, the days begin to decrease, sunlight begins to decrease daily by about a minute or 2 minutes per year until you get to the per day, until you get to the autumn equinox, September 22nd or September 23rd. Autumn equinox, equal nights, 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness. And then after that point, that's the white circle here. And then the sunlight continues to decrease about a minute to 2 minutes per day until you get to December 21st, which we just had a week and a half ago. That is the beginning of winter. It is the longest night of the year, 15 hours of darkness, only 9 hours of sunlight, coldest time of the year, beginning of winter and so forth. And so that's the deep, dark time. Now, when you look at this point, if you look at plant life and so forth, when the sun sets in the west, that's the time of Atem, Atemet, the red disk beginning to set, goes into the underworld. When the sun sets in the evening and it goes into the underworld and so forth, during the year cycle, that solar energy is decreasing and it goes into the equinox period, equinox or equinox period. That is September 22nd, 23rd. That is the conception time. It's also the harvest time. So when the sun is setting, it's akin to the fruits falling off the tree. We capture them in our Khan culture. It's called po bere, the time of the po, the harvest and so forth. So you harvest the fruits of your labor. When you harvest them, and there's a celebration and people consume the foods, the first yam and all of that. But when you harvest, you also take the time, if you're wise, to take the seeds out of the fruits and so forth and replant them. So you take that seed and then you plant it in the ground, just like the solar disk coming and setting in the west and then penetrating the earth and going into the underworld. You take the seed, you plant it in the ground, you cover it over with dirt and you water it. That is actually a funerary ceremony. bury the body and cover it over with earth and pour libation and so forth, and everybody leaves and so forth. But then the germination takes place. There's a germination underground, the seed breaks, the plant starts to germinate, and the roots go down deep in the dark soil. That's like midnight or the winter solstice. And then a few months later, the seeds start breaking through the surface, and all of a sudden there's a rebirth, there's a sprouting. And people can see something that was going on in the underworld, in the unseen. Well, by March 20th, when the sprouts break through, what was going on in the underworld and the unseen is now made manifest in the seen. So that is the birth. But the conception is the beginning, and the birth is the second beginning. So the conceiving time is Atem, Atemet, autumn. It's the harvest time, but also the seeding time. So when we're cooling down in the evening, and then we go into the underworld, we go internal, we study, we, cool down, and then we go to sleep and so forth, and we regenerate so we can resurrect in the morning. That's akin to a seed being planted in the ground, going to get rejuvenated, the roots going deep down in the soil, grabbing the water and the nutrients, stimulating themselves, generating that fire and vitality, and then rising up and breaking through the surface. We go to sleep, the deep darkness, that's the black circle and so forth, that's midnight, that's winter and so forth. And at the spring, we resurrect or we rise once again. So conception is key. Let's look at this cycle. We were showing that the actual sacred points within the cycle, they're the 4 seasons: the spring equinox, summer solstice, autumn equinox, winter solstice, and so forth. These are the 4 quote unquote cardinal points here. But the in-between points are sacred as well. 40 days after the spring equinox, you have the mid-spring and so forth. The whites in our spring they used to have a May Day celebration. Then you have the summer solstice, which is noon and so forth. But then you have what they used to call the Day of the Dead, August 2nd in between. That's a sacred midpoint. That's the crystallizing point. We have a sacred observance there. Then you have the autumn equinox. Then you have quote unquote All Saints Day, 40 days after the equinox. That was a sacred midpoint. And then you have December 21st, the solstice, and then Groundhog's Day, February 2nd. That's a sacred midpoint. So you have the 4 points, the solstices and equinoxes, and then you have the midpoints, 40 days or 42 days after each equinox and each solstice is a sacred midpoint. In our ancestral culture, like the Ohini Eniwa Adinkra symbol, we show these sacred 8 points. This is our cycle of the day. It's also our cycle of the year. And different parts of the day, we engage in certain activities. Different parts of the year, we engage in certain activities. There are ritual practices associated with these 8 points during the day, as well as during the year. In our Khan culture, when you look at the evening point, when the sun is setting and penetrating the earth, and there's a conception, that is the harvest time, but also the seeding time, and that is our New Year's Day. On the continent, around that time in September, they have Ojira, which means purification. That is the new year. In North America, we have Obrajira in the Akan community, where we have a 7-day New Year observance, September 16th through the 22nd. And the 22nd is the equinox, and that is Happy New Year. Our year begins September 22nd, or some years is September 23rd, depending on the year and so forth. Or either one, it's either September 16th through the 22nd or September 17th through the 23rd. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay, so we have these sacred observances, 7-day observance to the new year, harvest time, but also the seeding time, and we engage in ritual practices. So we do the same thing with regard to ancestral ritual, with regard to pouring libation, meditation, ritual song, ritual dance, ritual chant. We have different gateways to the spirit realm. Some are expansive, fiery gateways to the spirit realm, like ritual dance. Some are cool gateways to the spirit realm, which is susu or meditation. You also have ritual song, ritual prayer, ritual movement, and so forth. So different expressions of ritual practice. They have their own energy complexes. They have different parts of the day, but that's what we engage in. Now, so let me switch back out of that. Okay. So when you see here Senejem and his wife Ai Neferti, they're engaged in you see the sickle here. That is the symbol of Ma'a and Ma'at. And let me pull that up right quick. Hold on one second. I want you to see we did an article on this, and I just want you to see this. See the piece, but it's showing that the symbol there is not only the symbol for the sickle, but the symbol for the sickle is a symbol of Ma'at, and it's also about cultivation. But Ma and Ma'at are the male and female forces of divine law and balance. So, and I want you to see that. So let me pull this up. We wrote this as an article. We put it in one of our journals. It's still online. It's a free download, so you can access it, whenever you want to. In fact, we did a couple of articles. When we're talking about Ma'at, male and female force of divine law and balance, we were showing in this one, there's the text called the Usek Ma'ati. We're talking about ritual balance and Ma'a and Ma'at. And we show physiologically the dual hall of Ma'at that you see in ancient Kemet. When we talk about the person transitioning, they go to the hall of Ma'at. Their heart is weighed against a feather on the scale of Ma'at balance to see if they're balanced spiritually. If they are, they're accepted into the ancestral realm and so forth. But physiologically, the dual hall of Ma'at we show is the ear canal leading to the vestibular system. So when you look at the text of Kemet, the vestibular system is the inner ear where the water is and so forth. That is your balancing system. So there are two halls that lead to a sacred shrine or sanctuary within the physical head. In the inner ear, you see it purple right here. These two halls leading to a center of balance. And when it's working properly, you're balanced. If there's a problem with the inner ear, then you're off balance. So in your physical body, in the head region, there's the dual hall of Ma'at, the Usek Ma'ati. So we were talking about that, and we did a whole broadcast on that. Hold on a second. But then we also showed another aspect of Ma'an Ma'at, because those equinox points are the balancing points of the year. You have sunrise, which is, hold on a second. I want to make sure you were able to. Okay, I'm not sure if you. Okay, it went out for a second. I want to make sure that you saw that I was posting. Okay, if you didn't see this part, I want to make sure you saw it. Okay, so we said that we published this article a while back and we included it in our journal. So you should be seeing that now. So what we were saying is the inner ear, the purple section here, is the vestibular system that allows you to maintain your balance, and the ear canals leading to the inner ear where the eardrums are and so forth, and the vestibular system are the dual halls of Ma'at, or the dual halls of balance. So these areas here are the sacred shrines, the sanctuaries of Ma'at and Ma'at, the male and female divinity of divine law and balance. So in the papyri, the text of Kemet, when they're talking about the person is going before the divinities, Ma'at and Ma'at, in the sacred dual hall of balance and so forth, to see if their spirit, their heart is balanced out by a feather, to see if they pass that test on the scale of Ma'at, to see if they're balanced. And if they pass that test because they lived in harmony with divine order, they as a new ancestral spirit are allowed to live in the company of the pristine ancestral community. This is what physiologically what they're talking about. There's a shrine in the body that does that, that reflects that. Now, that's what we were looking at. And then I clicked on this, one of the journals that we published. Let me make sure you can see that as well, because sometimes the screen is not switching over. So, okay. Okay, so you should be seeing it now. All right. So we included a few of these. This is our Ojiraman article talking about nation building restoration for Afuraitkaitnit people. We have a yearly conference on nation building restoration. Ojiraman, the Purified Nation Conference. That's always around the summer solstice. So we included some of these articles in that journal. So Ma'al, Ma'at, and judgment. So you have the male divinity Ma'al, the female divinity Ma'at, the forces of divine law and balancing creation. So just like you have the inner ear and the right and left that balances your body, there are forces in creation that balance earth and balance all of creation. On earth, with regard to the seasons, the spring equinox and the autumn equinox, these are the balancing points, equal nights. During the day, that is sunrise, that's the horizon of earth, breaking through the horizon. Sunset, passing under the horizon, these are the balancing points of the earth. They're governed by the twin divinities, Ma'at and Ma'at, the male and female forces of divine law and balance. Now, when you look at Sennajem, this is a close-up of the papyrus we showed you earlier. The sacred farming tool of the sickle for cutting, separating, distinguishing, discerning between what is needed and what is not needed. That is the same function of Ma'at and Ma'at. When you're in harmony with divine law and balance, you can attune to what is in harmony with order, and you can discern or distinguish or cut away that which is not in harmony with order. So a judge is able to do that if they're holistic. They can determine what's in harmony with the law and what's out of harmony with the law and direct you towards the law. Same thing with our ancestral culture, our honorable elders and eldresses. They use that sickle for discernment to separate that which is out of harmony with law and what is in harmony with law. So you'll see the symbol for Ma'at, divine law and balance, is also literally the sickle used to harvest the grain. And you'll see that once again here. And so that's why you'll see Ma'at and Ma'ah, the general terms, truth, integrity, uprightness, justice, the right, verity, genuineness, law. That's what Ma'at means. The same thing with Ma'ah. To present the given offer, make an obligatory statutory offering and offering sacrifice in general, because that's dealing with law. And when you look at the divinities themselves, Ma'ah, a god of law, order, truth, and integrity, you'll find him in the 12th hour, 11th hour of the Duat, as well as the pyramid text and so forth. And when we went to Kemet, we found him in the 11th hour of the Duat and took pictures of that. And you also have Ma'at, the goddess personification of law, order, rule, truth, righteousness. So you have these balancing points, but on the mundane level, the instrument that facilitates your understanding of separating out of harmony with order and in harmony with order is the sickle, and that's how the name is spelled in the Medutu and the hieroglyphs. But you also have, of course, Ma'a, to kill, to slay. To kill, to slay, you're separating a discordant. If there's someone who's a murderer, a rapist, and so forth, and you kill that individual to preserve the integrity of divine order, you're adhering to divine law. So you also have Ma'a, meaning to see, to inspect, to perceive. You see the eye right here and so forth, and you still see the sickle in between. And you see it spelled this way and so forth. It has to do pointing to the region in between that separates, and also points to the fact that you have these inner ears, and in between that is the sacred, quote unquote, third eye, so to speak, the eye of inner vision that determines, distinguishes, separates, cuts, divides out, and makes proper assessments of the things that are separated into different categories and so forth, and have a holistic understanding of them. This is what we're talking about. So you have Ma'an, Ma'at, male and female force of divine balance and so forth on earth, within your physical body, spiritually. But that point of balance at the autumn equinox, the sun setting, but also the harvest time, we invoke Ma'an, Ma'at at the harvest time. That's facilitated by Atem and Atemet. We separate the plants that we need and the fruits and so forth, and we consume them, but then we're intelligent enough to take the seeds out because we're forward thinking. We're going to need those plants to return, and we seed. During the time of the harvest in September, for example, in the Gullah and Geechee culture and so forth, that's a big harvest time. It's a celebration. Just like on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit in September, it's a big harvest time. It's a celebration in September. But it's also the seeding time. You're sowing the seeds. And then 6 months later, the birthing time, the second, part of the year, the second half of the year, the sprouts come, and there's a celebration as well, because we know that, it's going to be an abundant year and so forth. Now let's go back. All right. So this sacred cycle actually governs every aspect of our lives. You have the fire, water, earth, and air. Those are the four elements that make up us, our physical bodies, of course, with the, copper and zinc and iron and all the different elements of earth and so forth. Of course, we're 70+% water. The breath in our bodies is what gives us our capacity to be animated. And of course, the fire allows us to be alive and to function and to operate and have power and strength and everything else. These four elements that make up our physical bodies, the spiritual aspect of them make up our spirit bodies. And there are male and female divinities that govern every aspect of them. So at the seeding time, the sun setting, Atem and Atemet, the male and female force of the quote unquote autumn, which is Atem, Atemet. That name is stolen from the actual deities that govern that time period. That's the time that we focus on for the conception, the new year, and we invoke them ritually. We pour libation, we engage in ritual song, ritual chant, ritual drumming, and so forth to invoke these spirits so they can bring that energy of balance into the community through spirit possession, spirit communication, and so forth. And the same thing with the other times of the year. You have the, spring equinox, Kepra and Keprit. You have the summer solstice with Shu and Tefnu. You have the winter solstice with Asar and Aset. So you have these different forces in creation that govern these different phases of the yearly cycle, but also of the daily cycle. And our libations, our susu, our meditation, our asau, our ritual dance, our ejum, our ritual song, our mpai, our ritual prayer. Every aspect of ritual practice is governed by these forces in creation. Now, let me show you. And if you have any questions on any of that, because that's what we want to share, I'm going to show you this right here. We have our Susu course coming up Tuesday. We have a couple of things going on with that. And Susu is the ancient term for meditation in our ancestral language. So if you look at our flyer here, you see Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, and you see him seated in the traditional Susu posture, which people say, oh, he's meditating and so forth, sitting with his legs crossed and so forth. That predates India by thousands of years. In fact, we brought that culture into India tens of thousands of years ago, before the whites and offspring existed on Earth. So meditation, as well as yoga and chakras and everything else, we exposed the fact that they took these terms and titles from ancient Kemet and, corrupted them and tried to co-opt them into their own practice. But that is Amenhotep, the son of Hapu. We also have a sacred ancestress from Akan culture on this flyer. She's seated on her throne in the Susu posture, meditating and so forth. But we have not only do we conduct, hold on a second. We don't not only conduct meditation sessions, but we have a certification process. So I've been publishing on Susu meditation from an Afurakani, original Afuraitkaitnit African perspective for 20 years, 21 years actually. Been practicing that for 30 years, but started publishing on it 21 years ago with the release of the Uben Sheng book, my first book, back in 97. But we started certifying people where you can become certified as a meditation instructor, and then you can use that certification to generate income for yourself while you conduct meditation sessions for places of business. When people have employees and they want to have them in a breakout sessions at a conference to facilitate productivity at work, meditation does that, reduces stress, reduces anxiety, makes people more focused and disciplined, and it enhances work productivity. So different corporations incorporate that with their employees. They'll bring you out for like a 20-minute session, pay you a couple of $100s for that. If you go to schools, if you want to work with youth, they incorporate that at the beginning of the school day, the middle of the school day, and the after-school programs. They'll have the children sit down and meditate for 10 or 15 minutes, and you can guide them through that and get paid $200 or $300 for a half-an-hour session. After-school programs, human services organizations where people are social workers and they have therapists and they're at women's shelters or family shelters or workforce development, all kinds of programs in different communities. And if they have a therapeutic session like weekly therapy, group therapy, they'll bring you out one Friday or Thursday and say, hey, this session, we're going to have this person take us through a meditation session that assists with reducing anxiety, balancing hormones, helping with weight loss, overcoming addictions, being more focused, not being controlled by emotions, helping you with your diet and so forth, purifying yourself, helping with healing. You're going through some surgical procedures and things like that, a number of different things that benefit the people. So human services organizations always have slots open to bring someone out once a week or once every few days to come and work with their clients for like 20 minutes to a half an hour. So when you're certified and you have that professional credential, you say, I'm a certified meditation instructor. That certification allows you to get paid to conduct these sessions. You generate income for yourself, but you also positively impact our people. So we've been doing the certification aspect of it since about a year and a half. We've been conducting meditation sessions for 20 plus years. But as far as certifying people, so now you don't have to go to a white corporation or a company where they're certifying you with some Hinduism and so forth. You can go to a Black-owned organization, get the same, better, more accurate professional credential, and you can use that certificate professionally. Now, so it's a 4-week course. It starts January 6th, Tuesday evening. 4 weeks after the 4 weeks, you get your certification. Now, we also, if you can't participate in the live course, the 4-week course, we have an archived version, which is 50% off. And you get all of the 4 weeks, the videos, you get the books, you get the articles, and you do a self-paced study. And when you go through all of the information that you would have gone through during the 4-week live session, you go through it on your own. If it takes you 4 weeks, or if it takes you longer than that or shorter than that, once you go through all of the information, all of the videos, all of the books, then we schedule a Zoom session and we go over all of the information to make sure everything is clear. And once we complete that, then we submit to you your certification. Hold on one second. Let me make sure you see if you can see that. Hold on one second. Let's see if I can. Okay. Okay, so this is what you would receive. Just so you can see exactly what, we're putting forward. Okay, so this is the certification that you get from our organization. So once you complete it, you become an Odwirafo. Odwirafo means instructor or teacher in the Akan language. So you're a Susu Odwirafo, meditation Susu Odwirafo instructor. So you have that title, but you also have, this is your credential. So anybody who needs to see your credential for funding sources, you submit that as a professional credential, and that allows you, that's your passport to get paid for people to cut a check for you for engaging in that, that process. So that next one, again, it starts January 6th. If you want to get in on the live course, of course, it's open to Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people exclusively. We teach our people, we train our people, we guide our people and so forth. So it's only for our people. And let me give you the website for that. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room. Okay, this is the site. And when you go on that site, you will see, and we'll just go to it now. You'll see a number of different products. We have our books. We have our root ritual sessions. We have our courses. We have 42 online courses. This is just one of them. So you'll see a number of different things on that site, but I just want you to see this. Okay, so when you go to the site, you will see the different products and so forth. And one of them is Susu. So when you click on that one, you'll see all of the details. So you see all the details here. You see the, video trailer for that. We have a payment plan option. For those who are subscribers, you get a 25% discount. So it's $299. You can do $99 down and pay over time the rest of it. And as we said, typically when people come out and they ask you to come out and say, hey, can you come to our school or come to our business, or you go to a cultural organization, like people had Kwanzaa events, so in January they have Martin Luther King, events and so forth. In February, all throughout February, all across different cities across the country, they have events at places of business as well as in the community for Black History Month. And they'll say, hey, do you know anybody who has a credential who can take us through an African-centered, grounded approach to meditation? We're not interested in what Hindus and Buddhists are doing. We want the original practice that comes from ancient Afuraitkaitnit Africa. Do you know someone who can take us through a 15 or 20-minute session like that? Your credential, you can go and they'll pay you to come out and speak for 15 or 20 minutes and take people through an introductory session. All throughout Black History Month. The same thing with their cultural events throughout the year. So whether it's places of employment, cultural organizations, human services, social services organizations, schools, there's always a number of different places all throughout the year. Every week, every month of the year, there are places you can go and establish these, pieces. Yeah, so spring is the second part. And there's some people there's some groups on the continent who look at spring and they'll say, since that's the sprouting time, that's when they have their New Year observance. But then you have others who say, well, we do have an observance in spring. Like in our Akan culture, we have 2 observances. There's a 7-day observance at the autumn equinox. We harvest, Pobere, the harvest time. And then we have the, 7-day Ojira purification, New Year observance in September. And then in March into April, around that time, it switches on the continent. It's around April, late March into April. Here we do it in March around the equinox. It's called the Apo observance. And in fact, I'll pull that up right quick for you so you can see it. This is our page where we talk about those things. This is our page on our website. So as we said, we practice Akan ancestral religion because we're Akan under the Akan term Undu, which is called hoodoo in North America. So when Akan people were forced into North America, we continued Akan ancestral religion as Undu, which later came to be pronounced hoodoo. When Yoruba people, for example, were forced to North America. Wait, hold on one second. Okay. When Yoruba people were forced to North America, they continued Yoruba ancestral religion under the Yoruba term Juju. When Ewe people were forced into North America, they continued Ewe ancestral religion under the Ewe term Voodoo. So every group that came, we're talking about North America and United States. Yes, we know about Haiti with Voodoo, Cuba with, Lukumi, and South America and Brazil with Candomblé. But in the United States, we maintained our ancestral religious practices as well. So the hoodoo man and hoodoo woman were the Akan man, Akan woman. The Juju man, Juju woman is the Yoruba man, Yoruba woman. The voodoo man, voodoo woman is the Ewe man, Ewe woman. If you practice Wanga in North Carolina and South Carolina, that comes from the Ovambo people who use the term Wanga in their tradition. So all of us maintained our ancestral religious practices. We're not dependent on going to the Caribbean or South America or the continent to get an African religion and bring it back home to us. We only do that if we believe falsely that we never maintained our traditions. But everybody has their own name for this practice in different languages. Our people in Akan, we call them Apo and Obrajira. Apo, Afashe, the Apo observance, 13-day observance in the spring around the equinox in March. And that honors the spring equinox, and it's a purification time as well. Po means to reject, to purify, to purge, so you can move into the second half of the year harmoniously. So that's the Apo observance. And then the second part of the page is the Obrajira observance, and that is the 7-day New Year observance that we were talking about. So we have both. And you'll notice when you look at different groups on the continent, they'll have different observances around those times. And when you look at them, you'll see they're doing similar things. There's a process of purification around the equinox in the fall. There's a process of purification around the equinox in the spring. The 2 balancing points of the year, Ma'at and Ma'at balancing points, you'll find that in both. Okay. So again, our Susu course begins Tuesday, but if you want to do the archive version, you can start that today. The archive version is 50% off the regular price, so it's $199 for the entire archive course. And we have a payment plan if you want to break that up into payments, if you want to, do it that way. We have that. We have a payment plan here, $99 down. If you want to structure a different payment plan, say if you wanted to put $49 down, you can send us an email if you want to do it that way. And you can start off either one, $49 down, and you can pay monthly. But as we said before, by the time you get your first gig, say it's a corporation, it's a business, or a human services organization, and they pay you $200, then you paid your entire course off with your first, 20-minute meditation session. And going forward, you're just generating income for yourself while you're positively impacting our people. So that's one of the pieces right there. We said earlier, and then we'll be done. If you look here, Medut Toro Part 1, Medut Toro Part 2, you click on that. Learning to read and write the language and culture, language and script of ancient Kemet. So you're learning to read and write the Medut Toro, the so-called hieroglyphs. We have Part 1. It was a 6-week course that we did, and then we did Part 2, which was another 6-week course. There's a book called Let the Ancestors Speak. It's a 271-page book, which is beginning and intermediate advanced grammar and language of ancient Kemet. And we go through that book in detail and so forth, how to read and write the language and symbols of ancient Kemet. And we also do cultural comparisons. So we have the Akan language, and you put the words, the Akan language, next to the words in the hieroglyphic dictionary, and you'll find that the same words with the same definitions, the same deities, same meanings, and so forth. So we can bring what Europeans can't do. When they teach a course in reading and writing the hieroglyphs, they're just talking about sounds and words and definitions and going forward. But we do the same thing, but in addition to that, we can show those exact same words, for example, in the Akan language, same deities that we invoke today. They have the exact same name. So the Akan people in the forest in the 1800s, talking to some missionary who came and wrote a dictionary out. And what does this word mean in Akan? What does this word mean? What's the word for cat? Miel. What is the word for dog? Kramine. What is the word for fire? Oja. What's the word for earth? Asaase. And they list all these words in the dictionary, but then you go get a hieroglyphic dictionary and put it next to the dictionary that the Europeans compiled in the 1840s with the Akan people in the forest. And all the words that those Akan people in the forest in the 1840s were telling these missionaries what they mean in their language. The exact same words you find in the hieroglyphic dictionary that's dealing with the language 5,000 years ago. So we're the same people speaking the same language, worshiping and invoking the same deities, even into the Akan people being forced into North America, into the Hoodoo tradition, same deities, same ritual pronouncements and so forth, same thing. So we bring more to the course than just the regular, we bring the regular stuff, the grammar, the words, the lexicon, all of that. But in addition to that, the cultural aspect, the cultural continuity. So this Medut Toro course, Part 1 and Part 2. The first one's a 6-week course, second one's a 6-week course. It's archived now, so you can access it at any time. This is the book that we go into detail about, A Guide to the Grammar of the Language of Kemet, 271-page book. You get that download as part of the course, of course. So that Part 1, and then we also have Part 2. It took us initially 12 weeks, and each session is about 2.5 hours. So it took us 12 weeks to go through the entire book. So that's why we have it in 2 parts. But you get all the 12 videos of all the 12 weeks. You get the book and then other related books as well. The reason we put this out as a course is because we saw that people were charging like $300 or $400 for a course of reading and writing the Medut Toro. Our course is $15. And if you want to get both of them as a bundle, you can get them both for $20, and that's why we put it on the site. People don't need to it's one thing to give people a credential like our learning how to teach people meditation, and you can go out and use that as a professional credential, and that's a training and so forth. That's one thing. But to teach people how to read and write the language, and you just want to learn, what's the sound for A or B or C in the hieroglyphs, people don't need to be charging $400 or $500 to learn that. So our course is $15. You can pay for the first course, $15. If you like it, you can purchase the second course, or you can purchase both of them now for $20, and we send you all of the material, and you can just study on your own. There's no test or anything. This is just self-study. So, but that's on the site. And then you will also see, finally, a number of different things on the site. We have our weekly group healing session. We're in the midst of a 7-week cycle, talking about the nature of the 7 Ba, or spirits of Ra and Ra'et, the divine living energy animating us. So in ancient Kemet, there, Ra is said to have 7 Ba, or 7 spirits. Same with Ra'et. So we're going through each one and having a group healing ritual for that each Sunday through February 8th. You'll see that information. You'll see the information about the animal totems and mineral totems and plant totems and human totems in this piece, and the fire element, water element, earth element, air element, as 2 sets of 4 ritual cycles. We just went through those processes and we made it archived. And then our book, Odwirafo, as we mentioned before. All of this is on the website. So this is the book, if you came in a little bit later. It's a 600-page book, full color, 8.5 by 11, so it's encyclopedia size. Look on the back, as we said before, the 31 books that I've published, I took 12 of them that represent, that have cosmology, trustery, linguistics, ritual culture, ritual practice, and so forth. Those that were focused on those, we took 12 of those books and combined them into one large 600-page volume. So when you look at the Kuku Tuntum, the origin of the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, and Talmud, so we show how did they make up the fictional character Jesus? How did they manufacture this fictional cartoon character Muhammad, who never existed? Jesus never existed, black or white. Neither did Muhammad. Neither did Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, David, Moses, Aaron. None of them. We expose how these characters were manufactured. Allah is a fictional character. Yahweh is a fictional character. Buddha is a fictional character. Brahman. So we go into detail about all that in the Kuku Tuntum. That's one of the books. Ankh, the origin of the term yoga. Karakasa, origin, the nature of the chakra. We go into detail about that. The book Koko Ball, where we show that dissexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemet. In fact, there's a divine prohibition against that in the texts of ancient Kemet, because Europeans are trying to promote this idea that we accepted that, which we did not, of course. A number of different things in these 12 different books. So our book is on Amazon. It's been on Amazon since last March, well, February into March. Amazon takes 60% off the top, so booksellers always have their own book on their own website, and then they have it on Amazon. We can sell it cheaper on our website because, Amazon takes that 60% cut. So you'll always see that with most booksellers, they have both Amazon and the regular website. If you order from our website, it's a little bit cheaper. It's $44 plus shipping, which is $52. If you order on Amazon, it's $59.95 because they charge so much for that piece. So you can order that now, and we also have it on our regular website as well. So this is the PayHip site, but if you go to the other site, and let me just give you that link because there's an extra option on that page, and you need to see this page anyway. This is our book page on our website. Nhoma means book. So just to scroll down, the term Nhoma means book. And when you go to that page, you will see the cover, all of the 31 books we've published. Let me just pull that back. 1 second, okay. So you just saw one of them. This is one of the books we published. We were talking about that one earlier with the deity Atem. This is the cover of Ankh, the origin of the term yoga, Karakasa, order and nature of the chakra, showing that these terms came from ancient Khanate Kemet thousands of years before India. We talk about Ra and Ra'et as they manifest in the Akan culture. The divine prohibition against dissexuality, homosexuality in ancient Kemet. We have the nature of the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity that governs the head, and so forth. Afuraitkaitnit, the origin of the term Africa. We looked at a portion of that earlier. Kukutuntum, the ancestral jurisdiction, talking about the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, and Talmud, and all of that. But so you'll see all 31 books on that page. But when you look at the beginning, you'll see that our Odwirafo book is up top. When you click on the Buy Now page, and I'll put that link in the chat room now for the Nhoma piece. Let me put this over here. The only difference here is when you go through our page to do that, it'll take you to the Square platform, and it's $44 plus shipping, $52, but you can choose Afterpay at checkout, and you can break up the payment into 4 payments of $13. So that's the reason we have it. We use the Square platform because they have that automatic option. So when you click on the checkout, you see that you have the option. So you can place the order, and you can see right here, 4 interest-free installments of $13 each. So that's why we have it like that on the book, on the page. So let me put that link in the chat room now. If you want to order it like that and you want to place the order now for $13 through Afterpay. So Afterpay is it's kind of like Affirm. So when you're buying things like flights and things like that, or even on Amazon, you can choose Affirm, and you can break your payments up into 4 payments, or Shopify, they do the same thing. On Square, they use Afterpay, and if you get approved, you can break it up, into 4 interest-free payments. So that is the link, the direct link for our page on our website, for our book page. Nhoma means book, so odwirafo.com/Nhoma, that's the link. So you can order the book now and place the order for $13, and then you won't have to pay the next $13 for another couple of weeks. And every few weeks, you pay $13 for the next, 6 to 8 weeks. Once every 2 or 3 weeks, you pay $13, and you have 3 more payments, and you're done. So, and Asaase too, it was a few people who ordered the book over the past 2 days, yesterday or the day before. We appreciate that support, because that also goes into helping us with funding and completing our second Hoodoo film documentary. The first Hoodoo film documentary, part of a Hoodoo film documentary trilogy, is on this YouTube page. You can watch it for free right now. In fact, we have 2 documentary films on our page. So you can watch them for free on our YouTube page. But when you see the Hoodoo film, that's part 1. We're working on part 2. We had a little stall a few months ago. We wanted to get it out back in October, but we're going to focus on releasing it in February during Black True Story Month, not His Story, but True Story Month. We'll have the second Hoodoo film out, and that'll be a good time to have it out, because now everybody's interested in Hoodoo because of the film Sinners and so forth. So there's a renewed interest in the Hoodoo tradition, and we're putting accurate information out about Hoodoo and connecting it to its origins in ancient Khanid and Kemet and Ghana and Ivory Coast amongst the Akan people. So we want to finish that film for February. So anytime you purchase a book or a course, like the $15 hieroglyphic language course or the book, that also helps us to fund so we can get this film out as soon as possible. We're working on it, but we want to get it out by February. So Asaase to those who purchased the book over the past couple of days, because that's helping us to get the film. And you'll see we post some updates on the film and the progress of the film on our social media pages. So if you like part 1, you're really going to like part 2, because part 2 is focused on ritual. Part 1 was dealing with the identity of Hoodoo as Akan, and the cosmology, and the mojo and the jackball, and the all these different things that you know about Hoodoo and where they come from. But then the second part is dealing with Hoodoo ritual. So we're working on that now. Okay. There's a question, don't mean to be off topic, but why were the whites able to take so much of us from the continent into slavery? Is it that we were too divided? Yeah, so even if you look in, and I'll take this, but then we have to go. But if you look at in the region of Ghana, where many of the forts are, Europeans showed up in the 1471. And then 10 years later, they built a fort. And at the time, the fort on the coast was similar to like a quote unquote strip mall, shopping mall, where they would bring their goods and put them in the fort from Europe. And then we would bring goods from the interior. They would exchange and barter. And, that's what they were doing for a number of years. That was 1482 when they set that up. But then, the following century, that's when the enslavement began. So they were never capable of going into the interior, taking our people and dragging them out and throwing them on boats and so forth. Europeans were never able to do that. That never happened. What happened was they sitting on the coast, some of our people, different groups who were infighting, sometimes infighting within the same clan or nation ethnicity, and sometimes separate ethnicities. Prisoners of war were captured. In the past, if you fought a neighboring group and you dominated them, you captured their prisoners, you had a few options. You can either hold them in your prison, you could kill them, or eventually when the war is over, you can let them go. Those were the options you had. For hundreds of years, that was the only option you had. When the Europeans showed up, they said, well, we'll pay you for them. So now instead of holding them and keeping them in your prison until the war was over, or killing them, like if they set your village on fire and killed a bunch of your people, you could kill them or you can imprison them. They're like, well, we'll pay you, we'll give you some goods, and we'll take them from you. So the individuals who ran up in your village and burned it down and killed a number of your people, you could either kill them, or now you have the option to sell them to, this foreigner. And some of our people who were infighting, they were doing that. Some of our people got caught up in Islam. They invade the other groups that weren't involved in that. Now we're fighting back and forth. We're fighting the ones who are brainwashed with this fake religion. We're maintaining our ancestral religion. Some of our people get caught, they're prisoners of war, and then they get sold to the European. Now, the intelligent amongst us never sold anybody to the European. It's the ones who got compromised. So, but the Europeans were never strong enough to just go into the interior, snatch us up, and bring us back. We had to be infighting, and they purchased the prisoners of war and so forth. On the flip side, you look at Black people who got caught up in the pseudo-religion of Islam, became Moors in North Afuraitkaitnit. If you look at the Barbary Coast slave trade between the 15th century and the 19th century, or 18th century, 300-year period, Black people who were brainwashed with Islam became Moors and so forth, along with the, Arabs, Persians, and so forth. There was the Barbary Coast slave trade. So you have Black people who were Moors involved in Islam, working with white Arabs and so forth, and they were invading Europe, and they were enslaving white Christians and selling them throughout the Mediterranean. And they were doing that for 300 years. During that time, if you look at, some of them will say it was 1.25 million, some will say it's 2 million. The numbers vary, over 1 million, but they were raiding, Europe, raiding the coastlines of Europe and so forth, snatching Europeans, putting them on boats and selling them throughout the Mediterranean. So the Barbary Coast slave trade. Let me pull this up for you right quick, just so you can see. We did a broadcast on this, by the way. So I just want you to see the, Odwirafo Barbary Coast. If you do that, this is it right here. Just so you can see the image right there. So you see it says Odwirafo, white slaves, 300-year Barbary slave trade, fictional Jesus could not stop slavery. So we put it out there just so people could see. When they talk about, well, how come, your gods and goddesses couldn't stop slavery from happening? Jesus must have been more powerful. Yet the white Christians were being enslaved by Black Muslims and Arab Muslims for 300 years, being snatched up from their homelands and sold through the Caribbean. And somehow Jesus couldn't save them for 300 years and millions of them being captured and enslaved. And they were, in the Caribbean, or in the Mediterranean. Now, it was foolish of us. We should have slaughtered them as opposed to participating in an enslavement process. And before we did that, they did the same thing with us. There was always going back and forth, fighting back and forth, and so forth. But how come Jesus wasn't able to stop white Christians from being enslaved for 300 years in the Barbary Coast slave trade? Jesus never existed. At the same time, some of our people were Muslims in the western part of the continent who got caught up in enslavement. So we can say the same thing. Well, how come Allah didn't stop you as Muslims from being enslaved? If you're going to say, how come our ancestral religious divinities didn't stop slavery, how come Allah didn't stop 300 years of a small percentage of Black people involved in Islam who got enslaved? Most of us weren't. How come Allah didn't stop that? Those who were involved in Christianity, like from the Kingdom of the Congo and so forth, how come Jesus didn't stop that? How come Jesus hasn't stopped racism in America? So in reality, what really happened is those of us who were infighting, the whites and offspring sat along the coast, waited for us to fight and capture prisoners, and then they purchased the prisoners and took them into enslavement. They were too weak to run up in our communities and snatch our people up and put them on boats. They couldn't do that. So, and you'll find that the Europeans in the region of Ghana, they set up their forts in 1482. They didn't take over in that region until the 1880s. Slavery was already over. They were there for 400 plus years and they never conquered that area. It was the 1880s that the British took over first the Fanti, then they fought against the Asante. They fought multiple wars against the Asante. They called them the Anglo-Asante Wars, or the British Asante Wars. They fought multiple wars against the Asante people. They got defeated in each one. And in 1901, they took over because the Asante nation had split. Their Ohene, their king, died. Half of the nation wanted one person to be the next Ohene king. The other half wanted another person. It was a civil war. They were killing each other. And because they were killing each other and weakening each other internally, then the Europeans attacked from the outside, and that time they won the war. And they got annexed in 1901. The Europeans were there from 1471. They didn't take over with the Asante until 1901. And then in 1957, Ghana got its independence. So they were under the control of the British from 1901 to 1957. And then they took their independence under Kwame Nkrumah. So the false narrative that white people just showed up on the continent, beat us down, and threw us on ships, and we were praying to our deities and it didn't work, never happened. Okay. We did a whole broadcast on that as well to prove that point. So let me see. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and end it here. If you have any questions, hit us up. But again, the Susu course, if you want the live version or the archive version, you become a professional credential. You can do that. You can start that today. We have payment plan options for that. If you'd like to order the book, you can break it up into 4 payments and so forth. To put that on the check, yeah. And then also the Meduten Toro course, the $15. Learn how to read and write the Meduten Toro, the language and hieroglyphs of Kemet and so forth. We have the $15 for part 1. If you want part 1 and part 2 together, it's a bundle for $20 and you get both courses. You get the grammar book and the other books and articles associated with that, and all 12 weeks of the course. So, okay, so Yeda say we thank you for tuning in, and Yabeshiabio. We will meet again. That's all.